I refused to let my sister have my bedroom, and my parents tried to kick me out of my own inherited house. So, I had the police escort them out. Then, my dad broke in again and got arrested. This all went down over the past few months, and honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how epically my own dad managed to shoot himself in the foot. So, I'm 24, own a small real estate empire, and just had to call the cops on my own dad for breaking into my property. If someone told me this story 5 years ago, I'd have laughed in their face. But here we are, and I'm not even mad anymore. I'm impressed by the sheer audacity. When I was 15, my mom passed, and my dad wasted no time marrying this overbearing woman, Carmen, 47, female, who tried way too hard to replace my mom. After 3 months of her throwing away my mom's stuff and redecorating my room without permission, I moved in with my grandpa Rex. He was my dad's dad. A retired judge had this massive house with like 5 bedrooms. Dude said yes immediately. Best decision I ever made. He was cool, gave me space, but was always there when I wanted to talk. He taught me about money, how to manage property, legal stuff. Turns out, those lessons would save my ass later. When Grandpa died suddenly when I was 17, he left me everything. His house, 2 rental properties, and enough cash to get started. My dad got nothing, and he lost his mind. Started yelling about how the property should go to him since he was Grandpa's son. But Grandpa's will was bulletproof. He even made a video explaining why he did it. Said he trusted me to be responsible with it, unlike my dad. Here's where it gets weird. Instead of me moving back with Dad and Carmen, they decided to move into my house. Said their place was too small. And since I had this big house now, it made sense. I was still 17, so didn't really have a choice. But I set rules. They couldn't go in my bedroom or Grandpa's office. Those rooms had personal stuff and important papers. When I turned 18, I left for college out of state. Kept letting them live there rent-free. Only came back for holidays and some weekends. I paid all the taxes, maintenance, everything. Never asked them for a penny. Figured they were keeping an eye on the place for me. And instead of blowing Grandpa's money like a stupid teenager, I used the rental income to buy more properties. By the time I graduated at 22, I owned 6 rental units. After college, I got a job back in the same city and found myself a decent apartment about 20 minutes from the house. Kept building my portfolio. So, by 24, I had 8 properties making serious monthly income. That setup with my dad and stepmom worked perfectly for 9 years. They got free housing. I got peace of mind knowing someone was watching my first property. Everyone was happy until last month when everything went to hell. Dad called me saying this, "You need to clean out your room this weekend. We're giving it to Carmen's daughter, Becca." I'm standing in one of my rental properties doing an inspection, and this man is giving me orders about my own house. I stopped dead in my tracks. Who the hell is Becca? I've never even heard this name before. She's Carmen's daughter from her first marriage. She's fighting for custody of her kids and needs stable housing. Your room is the biggest one. I was so confused. Carmen had never mentioned she had a daughter before, and now, out of nowhere, this woman appeared, and they wanted her to live in my house? 9 years of free housing, and now they want to give away my bedroom to some complete stranger? But it started making sense why Carmen had treated me like such crap when I was 15. This woman had a daughter she'd completely abandoned and never talked about for 9 years. She couldn't even be bothered to mention that chick's existence, let alone maintain a relationship with her own kid. No wonder she had no problem throwing away my mom's stuff and trying to erase me from my own house. She'd already done it to her own daughter first. Are you completely insane? You're guests in my house. You don't get to make decisions about who lives here, I said. That's when Dad's mask came off completely. Started screaming about family obligations, how I was being selfish, how Becca really needed this, and I was cruel for refusing. I'm standing in some random rental property, listening to my father have a meltdown because I won't give my bedroom to a woman I've never met. The manipulation was so obvious, it was almost insulting. Make me the bad guy for protecting my own space. Paint him as the caring family man, just trying to help someone in need. Classic guilt trip. "Don't touch my room or Grandpa's office," I said clearly, keeping my voice level, even though my hands were shaking with anger. "Touch either one, and I'll evict you immediately." Dad went nuclear. "You can't evict family. We've been living here for 9 years. We have rights." "You have the right to find your own place. Don't test me on this." Then he dropped the real bomb. They'd sold their old house years ago to pay off debt. They literally had nowhere else to go. I was hella mad. "Sounds like you should have thought about that before trying to give away my bedroom," I said, and hung up. I sat in my car for 10 minutes after that call, hands still shaking. Part of me couldn't believe it had come to this. The other part was already planning my next move. That night, I barely slept. Kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, but the guilt was eating at me. These weren't strangers. This was my dad, the same guy who taught me to ride a bike and came to my baseball games. Was I really about to make my own father homeless over a bedroom? I kept thinking about what people would say. Family, friends, relatives, everyone who'd ask, "How could you kick out your own dad?" The story would spread, and I'd be the ungrateful son who chose money over family. But then I remembered finding Carmen going through my phone at 2 a.m. when I was 15. I remembered my dad standing there like a statue while she threw away my mom's jewelry. I remembered 9 years of paying every bill while they lived free and acted like they owned the place. And on top of all that, I'd never even met this Becca before. She was nothing to me, not family, just some random woman Carmen had abandoned for years and now suddenly wanted to help. Why the hell would I put a complete stranger in my house for someone who couldn't even be bothered to mention her own daughter's existence for years? At that point, I was done being a pushover. That same night, Uncle Derek calls out of nowhere, my dad's brother, who I hadn't talked to in years because of some business falling out. "Hey kiddo, heard you're having some family drama. Maybe you should reconsider this eviction thing. Family's supposed to stick together, right?" I could smell the setup through the phone. Uncle Derek wasn't calling out of concern. He never cared about anything. Dad had gotten to him first, probably crying about his cruel son who was about to make him homeless. "I'll think about it," I lied, because I wanted to see what other moves they'd try. Derek seemed satisfied. Good. Your dad's been through a lot lately. This custody thing with Becca is really important." I hung up and called my lawyer. We agreed to go to the house early morning to give them official notice to leave. So, the next morning, I drove over with my lawyer to serve proper eviction papers. Legal by the book, no surprises. I was actually nervous as hell. My palms were sweating, and I kept rehearsing what I'd say to Dad's face. I pulled into the driveway of my own house and walked up to my own front door. Put my key in the lock. It didn't work. For a second, I thought I'd grabbed the wrong key. Then reality hit. These absolute morons had changed the locks on my house without telling me. After everything I'd done for them, they were literally locking me out of my own property. I pounded on the door until Dad answered, but he wouldn't open it, just talked through the wood like some paranoid criminal. "I'm not letting you in until you change your mind about Becca," he said. That's when every doubt I'd had disappeared. This has nothing to do with some custody case and helping family. They wanted control, especially my dad. He thought he could lock me out of my own house and force me to cave to his demands. And there I was, standing outside with a lawyer and Dad refusing to let me in. The cold anger was back, but now it was mixed with complete clarity about what needed to happen next. "You illegally changed locks on property you don't own, and you're refusing to let the actual owner inside," I said, my voice deadly calm. You just committed about 3 different crimes, genius. This is my home too. I have rights, he screamed behind the door. Your rights ended the second you locked me out of my own house. Hope it was worth it. I called the police immediately. My lawyer was already pulling up property records on her phone, building our case. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was ready for war. The responding officer listened while my lawyer showed him property records, inheritance documents, everything proving I owned the house. The police gave Dad a simple choice. Open the door and let me in, or get arrested for criminal trespassing on top of everything else. Dad finally opened up, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Carmen was crying in the background, while this random woman, Becca, sat in the corner looking uncomfortable as hell. The officer explained that Dad was being evicted for changing locks and refusing property owner access. Dad tried every excuse in the book. Nowhere to go. Lived there for 9 years. Claimed Grandpa had verbally promised him the house. Do you have any documentation of this verbal promise? The officer asked. Dead silence. I almost felt bad watching Dad realize how weak his position was. Any written agreement about your tenny here? More silence. Any proof you've been paying rent or contributing to property ownership? Dad was scrambling. I've been maintaining the property. I fixed the back door last year. With your own money or money provided by the property owner? The truth came out. I'd been paying for every repair, every improvement, every single expense for 9 years. Dad had been living completely free while I built a property empire around him. Watching Dad try to explain the situation was pathetic. He kept insisting he had rights as a long-term resident, that this was family business that didn't need police involvement. The officer just stared at him like he was speaking gibberish. Who changed the locks? The cop asked. Dad claimed he didn't remember the company name. Obvious lie. I could see him calculating whether admitting it would make things worse. The officer made some calls and tracked down the locksmith within an hour. This sketchy operation had done the work without verifying ownership or getting proper documentation. When the locksmith found out he'd been hired to lock out the actual property owner, you could hear him panicking about his license over the phone. I pressed charges against both my dad and the locksmith. Dad for illegal tampering and preventing property owner access. Locksmith for failure to verify ownership. The officer was writing up the reports while I stood there watching my relationship with my father officially end. Part of me felt sick about it, but I also felt relieved that the games were finally over. While Dad and Carmen were packing their stuff, I got a closer look at this Becca character. Mid-30s, nervous energy, kept checking her phone like she was expecting bad news. Nothing about her screamed mother fighting for custody. I decided to test the story directly. So, what's the timeline on getting your kids back? I asked her. She looked at Carmen, then back at me. It's complicated. The court process takes time. Red flag number 1. Vague answers. When a real mother would have specific dates, court schedules, detailed timelines burned into her memory. I kept pushing. How many kids? I asked. Another glance at Carmen. Just one, a daughter. How old? Long pause. She's 8 now. The whole interaction felt wrong. A mother fighting for custody would be talking non-stop about her kid, showing pictures, explaining the legal situation. This woman was giving me bare minimum answers, like she was making it up on the spot. Then Carmen stopped packing her stuff and snapped. "Oh, give me a break," she barked, stepping between us like she owned the place. "You're really going to interrogate her like she's on trial after everything we've been through?" She pointed right at me, voice rising. "You're a disgusting, selfish little brat with a bank account. Your mother would roll in her grave if she saw what you've become, hoarding rooms and money while your father's on the street and your stepsister is fighting for her kid. You think this house makes you powerful? It just makes you heartless." I didn't respond, but she kept going, louder now. "You didn't build this. Rex did. your precious grandpa, and you're too cowardly to admit that without him, you'd be nothing, just a spoiled kid playing landlord. Before I could even open my mouth, the cop near the door raised his hand. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "that's enough. This isn't your house, and you're one more outburst away from being removed for obstruction. I suggest you stop talking." Carmen clamped her mouth shut, but the look she gave me could have melted steel. I didn't flinch. I made a mental note to dig into Becca's story later because nothing added up. Right now, though, the only goal was getting them out for good. That first night after they moved out, I walked through my house in complete silence. 9 years of having other people living there, and suddenly it was just mine again. Should have felt good, but instead I felt this hollow emptiness. I went into my room and found they'd already started moving my stuff out. My clothes were in garbage bags. My desk had been moved to make room for a bed they'd ordered for Becca. They'd been so confident I'd caved to their demands that they'd already started giving away my space. And just like that, any doubt I had at that moment disappeared completely. These people had been planning to steamroll me, regardless of what I said. The lock change was just step one of a calculated plan to take over my house entirely. Meanwhile, the locksmith who'd changed my locks got absolutely destroyed by the licensing board. Turns out, this wasn't his first time doing shady work without proper verification. His license got suspended for 6 months. He had to pay a massive fine, and his business reputation was ruined when the local news picked up the story. The guy actually called me begging to drop the charges, claiming he didn't know Dad wasn't the owner. Voice shaking, talking about his kids and his mortgage, how this would destroy his livelihood. I felt bad for about 10 seconds. Then I remembered that professional locksmiths are supposed to verify ownership before changing locks. This is basic stuff. If you're going to change locks, make sure the person hiring you actually owns the property. Pretty simple concept. Ignorance isn't an excuse for not following basic professional standards. I told him, maybe next time you'll do your job properly. The harsh reality was that his sloppy work had enabled my father to lock me out of my own house. If I let it slide, what message did that send to other contractors who might cut corners in the future? Dad got charged with criminal mischief for the lock situation, plus trespassing for refusing to let me access my own property. During his court appearance, he showed zero remorse and kept insisting he had rights to his son's property. The judge was not having it. "Mr. Johnson, you illegally locked your son out of his own property, then broke into another property he owned. Your son didn't steal anything. He inherited property legally, and you committed crimes trying to take it." Dad actually stood up during sentencing and gave this whole speech about ungrateful children and family loyalty. He claimed I was stealing his inheritance and turning my back on family by enforcing property rights. Watching him make that speech was one of the most uncomfortable moments of my life. The man who raised me was standing in court blaming me for his own criminal behavior. Part of me wanted to stand up and say, "Dad, just stop talking. You're making it worse." But I stayed quiet. Let him talk. Let him twist it however he wanted. And in the end, he dug his own grave. He got 8 months, 5 for breaking and entering, another 3 for tampering with the locks. Not exactly a standing ovation moment, but satisfying in its own way. While he was busy dealing with court dates and legal headaches, things took another weird turn. About a month after the eviction, my phone rings. It's Uncle Derek, and the man sounds like he's in full-blown panic mode. No small talk, just jumps straight to it. He needed to sell his house immediately. Won't say why, just asks if I'm interested in buying. Now here's the part Derek didn't know, and this is where it gets good. The house he was trying to offload? That was actually my great-grandparents' old place, the one Grandpa Rex grew up in. Grandpa had handed it down to Derek years ago, but he later told me he regretted that decision. Said Derek let it fall apart, didn't take care of it like he should have. Grandpa even told me that if I ever got the chance to get it back, I should take it. Said it belonged with someone who'd actually respect the family history. And Derek? He had no idea who he was calling. In his mind, I was still just that college kid who lucked out with one inheritance. He didn't know I'd built a real estate empire while he wasn't paying attention. I offered him 40% of market value, knowing he was desperate. He said it was too low, but I could hear the panic in his voice. Same offer, but all cash. Close next week, and I'll cover all legal fees and moving costs, I countered. The desperation won. Deal. And I mean, business is business. If Derek was desperate enough to sell that fast, that was his problem to solve. After Derek signed the house over and took off with the cash, I figured that was the end of it. Quick sale, no questions asked. But about a week later, I got a call from an old neighbor near Derek's place. She's chatting with me about the house, and then casually drops, "Funny, I thought your dad was buying it. That's what he told everyone." Wait, what? That little comment sent me down a rabbit hole. I started putting pieces together, made a couple quiet calls, and yeah, turns out Derek had originally been planning to sell the house to my dad. They'd been talking for weeks. My dad had been scraping together whatever money he could before he got himself arrested, thinking he'd slide right back into his childhood home like nothing ever happened. And let me clarify things here. Dad didn't go to jail immediately after the first arrest. He was booked, denied bail, and held in county for weeks while the court sorted everything out. But before formal sentencing came down, he managed to scrape together bail through Derek, who sold him out later. That's how he got out long enough to try and buy Derek's place. And when Derek told him, "Your son bought it instead," my dad apparently assumed I'd done it for him, like it was some kind of peace offering. This man, who I had evicted, fully believed he was automatically entitled to live in any property I owned because, what? Being my father equals lifetime access to free real estate? Without even realizing it, I'd blown up his plan B. The house he was banking on? Gone. Snapped up by the one person he never saw coming. Me. But the thing is, he'd used the last of his scraped-together money to post bail. Money that was supposed to go toward buying that house from Derek. So now, he's out broke, and apparently still thinking there's a way in. 3 days after closing, I get a ping from the security system. I'd installed cameras to keep tabs on the contractors doing the renovations. I check the live feed from my office, expecting drywall guys or electricians. Nope. I'm watching my 55-year-old father full-on crawling through a broken window like a bargain bin cat burglar. Not subtle, not smart, just desperate. He's inside wandering around like he owns the place, opening drawers, checking closets, pacing like he's planning where the couch will go. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there watching it unfold on my phone, wondering if I should be angry or just impressed at the sheer delusion. I don't know what he was thinking, but he was literally breaking into property I owned while he was already facing criminal charges for the last time he messed with my property. Some people really never learn. I called the police immediately, but part of me felt sick about it. How had we gotten to this point? When the cops found Dad inside and he tried to explain that this is my family's house and my son bought it for me, I could see them trying not to laugh. The officers asked for documentation proving he lived there or had permission to be there. Dad had nothing. No job, no money, no plan. And when the cops told him the house he just broke into was legally mine, you could practically hear his brain rebooting in real time. He froze, just stood there like someone had yanked the cord out of his mental wall socket. This wasn't some misunderstanding. He'd already pulled the illegal lock change stunt a couple months earlier. So when they booked him this time, the judge took one look at the file and said, "Nope, no bail, 2 stunts in 2 months." That was enough for the court to decide he was either too reckless to be trusted or just straight up dangerous. Maybe both. While he sat in county waiting for his next hearing, I finally had the breathing room to look into something that had been bugging me since the whole Derek situation. The rushed sale, the panicked phone call, the zero explanation. It didn't sit right. So I started digging, made a few quiet calls, reached out to people who ran in Derek's orbit, old business contacts, mutual acquaintances from the local investor scene. Took a bit of time, but I finally pieced it together. Turns out Uncle Derek had been in way over his head. He'd borrowed big, like six-figure big, from a couple of shady business partners for some real estate flip that flopped hard. Not just a bad deal, full-on financial faceplant, the kind that leaves scorched earth behind. And when the cash dried up and he couldn't pay back the loans, these guys didn't just send polite emails. They came knocking. Legal threats, pressure to liquidate assets, real heat. Uncle Derek, being the coward he is, obviously panicked. Instead of owning his mess, he started quietly offloading everything he could, selling off furniture, draining his investment accounts, even liquidating personal stuff, all under the radar. It was like watching someone set their own life on fire just so the flames wouldn't touch anyone else's. And yeah, you can imagine how proud I am of my uncle and dad. And my offer on the house? That was his escape pod. He just needed one last lump sum to disappear, and I guess I was the lucky buyer who showed up right on cue. Wouldn't be surprised if the guy had his bags packed the morning we closed. Look, I actually felt a little used. No one likes being a chess piece. But let's be real, I still walked away with the property for 40% under market value. I wasn't exactly crying myself to sleep. Derek might have pulled a fast one, but he only needed to sell because he tanked his own life. That part wasn't on me. And just to be clear, I didn't lie for him. I may have casually mentioned to a few mutuals what direction he seemed to be heading when he left town. If you're going to burn your bridges with business partners and then try to ghost your way out of it, don't expect family to help hide the smoke. That's not how I operate. After that, I figured I'd seen the last of the drama for a while. Just wanted to focus on stabilizing the new property, tightening up leases, getting back to business. But life doesn't work like that. It never just hands you one mess at a time. While I was still juggling the legal cleanup from Dad's stunt and Derek's house, the past came crawling out from a totally different direction and hit harder than I expected. During Dad's court proceedings, I finally got the truth about Becca from an unexpected source. Carmen approached me outside the courthouse, looking like absolute hell, so desperate. "Please," she said, grabbing my arm with shaky hands, "can we talk? There's stuff you don't know about Becca." We sat in my car while Carmen fell apart completely. Turns out the whole custody battle story was complete fiction. Becca didn't have any kids to fight for. She'd lost custody of her one daughter years ago for neglect and substance abuse issues. The court case wasn't about getting custody back. It was about the state trying to permanently terminate her parental rights. Becca was fighting to keep even supervised visitation, not to get her daughter back. Carmen had made up the entire sob story to manipulate me into giving Becca free housing. They figured if I thought some poor mother was fighting to reunite with her children, I'd be more likely to help out. Classic emotional manipulation using fake kids as props. The betrayal cut deep, not just that they'd lied, but that they'd used the idea of a mother losing her children to manipulate me. That's some sociopathic level scheming right there. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" I asked Carmen. "Maybe I would have helped if you'd been honest." Carmen just stared at her hands. "Would you have?" Honestly, probably not. But at least I would have respected them for being straight with me instead of playing games. Carmen begged me to let them move into one of my rental properties once Dad gets out of jail. She promised they'd pay rent this time, be model tenants, and never cause problems again. I told her all my units had paying tenants with signed leases, which was a lie. She asked if I could help them financially with a deposit somewhere else. I walked away without saying another word. Word of Dad's legal troubles spread through the family like wildfire. Suddenly, I'm getting calls from relatives I barely knew, all with strong opinions about how I'd destroyed the family and abandoned my father in his time of need. And there's Aunt Susan, who I hadn't talked to since I was 12, called to lecture me about forgiveness and Christian values. Family forgives, honey. This is what Satan wants. Families torn apart by pride and money. Uncle Mike, Dad's cousin, wanted to know if I was really going to let family end up homeless over some silly property dispute. Like, 9 years of free housing was just a silly misunderstanding? Every single conversation followed the same script. I was the bad guy for enforcing boundaries. Dad was the victim of circumstances, and I should fix everything by giving him money or housing. The manipulation was so obvious, it was insulting. Not one of these people offered to help Dad themselves. Not one opened their own homes or checkbooks. They just wanted me to sacrifice my property and income to solve a problem Dad had created. "Why don't you let him stay with you?" I asked Uncle Mike. "Well, we don't have the space." "I see. So I should house him for free, but you can't because you don't have space." Got it. Dad was released from jail last week. Carmen called to tell me. Said Dad wanted to meet to clear the air and start over. I declined. She asked again if I could help them financially. Told her 9 years of free housing was all the help they were getting from me. Good thing I didn't wait around. After Carmen called, I filed a restraining order, and it turned out to be the smartest move I made because 2 days after his release, he showed up at my workplace. He stormed into the reception area, screaming about ungrateful children and stolen inheritance, demanding to talk to me man to man. My assistant was terrified. Clients were staring, and security was scrambling to respond. "Where is he? Where's my son? I raised him better than this." Dad was completely unhinged, waving his arms around and pointing at random people like they were conspirators. Security called the police while Dad continued his meltdown. He was yelling about how I'd stolen his home and destroyed his life when the cops arrived to arrest him for violating the restraining order. Watching my father get handcuffed in my office lobby was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. Everyone was staring. My phone was ringing with panicked calls from employees, and I had to explain to confused clients why my own dad was being arrested. The restraining order now keeps him 500 feet away from me, all my properties, and my workplace. He's also prohibited from contacting any of my tenants or business associates. I changed my phone number and gave all my tenants his photo, with strict instructions not to let him near any of my buildings. I also created an LLC for all my real estate holdings, extra legal protection in case Dad tries any future schemes. Some nights I lie awake thinking about everything that's happened. The rational part of my brain knows I did the right thing, protected my property, enforced reasonable boundaries, held people accountable for their actions. And the hardest part is explaining it to people. When someone asks about my family and I say, "My dad's in jail for breaking into my property," the looks I get are brutal, like I'm some heartless monster who destroyed his own father over money. But then I remember finding my stuff in garbage bags, ready to be thrown out so some stranger could have my room. I remember 9 years of paying every bill while they acted like they owned the place. I remember being locked out of my own house because I wouldn't cave to their demands. The guilt fades pretty quick when I focus on the facts instead of the emotions. While Dad was dealing with legal consequences, I closed on my 9th property last month, a duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood that should double in value over the next 5 years. Every month when I collect rent and review my portfolio, I think about how different things could have been. If I'd given in to Dad's demands, where would I be now? Probably fighting for space in my own house while supporting 3 adults who contributed nothing. The rental income from all my properties is more than most people make at their regular jobs. At 24, I have complete financial freedom because I made hard choices and stuck to my boundaries. I know that Grandpa Rex would be proud. He taught me that property ownership comes with responsibilities, but also with rights that need to be protected. He didn't tolerate people who thought they were entitled to other people's property, and neither do I. When I was cleaning out Grandpa's office after the eviction, something I'd never had the chance to do properly, I found some old documents in a locked drawer. Among them was a letter from Grandpa to his lawyer, written just a few months before he died. In it, Grandpa explained his disappointment in both his sons and why he planned to leave his estate to me. He mentioned Dad had borrowed over $100,000 from him and never paid back a cent. The letter also revealed that Derek had stolen money from Grandpa's real estate business when he worked there in his 20s. The letter made it crystal clear that Grandpa believed neither of his sons was financially responsible or trustworthy. Reading it made me realize I'd made the right call with both of them. Now, Dad's living in some studio apartment across town, working retail at 55 because his credit is destroyed and he has a criminal record. Carmen moved back to her home state to live with relatives after divorcing him in jail. She actually sent me a message on Messenger a few months later to let me know about the divorce and to apologize for everything that happened. I blocked her number halfway through the conversation. I don't want anything to do with that part of my life anymore. Becca disappeared completely once the free housing dried up. My real estate empire keeps growing. I'm looking at 2 more properties next month, both with strong rental potential in neighborhoods that are starting to turn around. Derek tried reaching out on social media last month, probably looking for a place to crash now that his creditors have tracked him down. I blocked him before he could even finish typing his sob story. 9 years of free housing wasn't enough. Paying every bill, every repair, every tax wasn't enough. They wanted to give away my personal space to a woman who was lying about a custody battle, then tried to lock me out when I refused. Every boundary I enforced, every legal document I filed, every hard choice I made, it was all worth it to get where I am now. Complete independence, financial security, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing nobody can manipulate me into giving away what I've earned. The friends who called me heartless, they're still working paycheck to paycheck while I'm building generational wealth. Even some of my closest friends said I should forgive and forget, but none of them offered to house Dad themselves. This holiday season, me and my girlfriend are hosting Thanksgiving at my house. We invited a few close friends who actually supported me through this mess. First holiday in years I'm actually looking forward to. No drama, no unreasonable demands, no unwelcome guests. Just people who respect and care about each other. Guess which one just bought his 9th rental property, and which one is working retail with a criminal record? Basically, don't mess with people's boundaries. Don't lie about custody cases for sympathy. Don't illegally change locks on property you don't own. And definitely don't assume family relationships give you the right to walk all over someone who's been supporting you for years. Game over. I won.